You're listening to
Catholic Sprouts,
the daily podcast for Catholic kids that strives to plant seeds of faith.
Hello, Sprouts! Today is Tuesday, March 14th, and I'm Cecilia from the Hildegard Collective, a ministry for Catholic musicians. We're time traveling this week through musical history in the Catholic Church, and today we're picking up where we left off yesterday, and we're going to go into the 14th, 15th, and 16th centuries. So yesterday we learned about music before the time of Christ, in the early Christian Church, how St. Isidore and Guido of Arezzo created a way for everyone to read music, and we met our friends St. Hildegard in Germany and Leonine and Periton in France during the medieval era. So during the 14th and 15th centuries, something new was happening in Europe. Art and learning flourished, and this was called the Renaissance. This was the time period when we had incredible artists like Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel and sculpting the Pietà, a beautiful statue of Mary holding Jesus after his body is taken down from the cross. When we look back at history, we can see that new things in music followed new things in art. So the Renaissance in music happened a little later, during the 15th and 16th centuries. A lot was happening during this time. Instruments began to look a lot like the instruments we know today, like the recorder, and the early trombone, which was called a sackbut, and the harpsichord, which is like the grandpa of the piano. Thanks to the work of our friends Leonine and Periton with their invention of that new kind of music called polyphony, music began to take on all kinds of new forms. Chansons and motets were types of pieces sung by choirs, and you still might hear some at Sunday Mass on occasion. Many musical settings of the Mass were written during this time period. A very popular thing to do was to take a Gregorian chant and create polyphony over it, creating this whole new sound. Before this, the carol was actually a type of popular music that was used for just about everything. But during this time period was when the carol began to be associated with Christmas most of all. And some of the Christmas carols that we have today come from this time period. During the medieval and the Renaissance times, we see music being divided into two categories. You had sacred music, which was music for church, and you had secular music, which was music for everyday life. These two main categories are going to stay the same for several hundred years until the 20th century. But we're still in the 16th century, and in the 16th century, something happened that changed the world forever. The stability of the Renaissance allowed art and music to grow, but it also allowed some bad things to happen in the church. People started to be greedy, and they were forgetting to follow what Christ teaches all the time. In 1517, Martin Luther, a Catholic priest, decided to break away from the church because of the bad things happening and start his own church instead, the Lutheran Church. This was called the Protestant Reformation. The Pope and the cardinals decided to hold a counter-reformation, and so they hold a council called the Council of Trent, so that they can fix the problems. And during this time, many Catholics, like St. Robert Bellarmine, realized that art and music can help fix things, so the church continued to be a place where the arts grew. One of the most important composers during this time was a man named Giovanni Palestrina. He wrote some of the most beautiful sacred music in all of history up to this point, and even up to today, including a lot of Mass settings. Palestrina used the polyphony that Leonine and Periton gave us, and he took it to a whole new level that hadn't ever been heard before. He helped develop a new style of writing music called counterpoint. Counterpoint is when you have a musical line and you write 1 or 2 or even 3 more musical lines to go with it. Now, this might sound an awful lot like polyphony, except here's the difference. In polyphony, the lines need each other to make sense. Counterpoint is a little more complicated than polyphony, because in counterpoint, all of the lines sound great by themselves, but they fit together like puzzle pieces to create something even more beautiful. So this is something that Palestrina came up with. Up until now, we've learned a lot about church music. But as time goes on, we find that Catholic composers didn't just write sacred music. They also wrote music for outside of church too. We're going to meet two composers tomorrow who did both of those things as we travel into the Baroque and the Classical time periods.
That's it for Catholic Sprouts today. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, continue to grow in your faith and truly sprout into the beautiful creation that God created you to be.
Hello, parents. Thanks so much for letting me get to share all about music history in the Catholic Church with your kids today. I'm the co-founder of the Hildegard Collective, a nonprofit that helps Catholic musicians grow in their faith and meet like-minded musicians. We've got an active podcast and blog going that you can check out, and soon we'll be launching a platform for connection and faith formation as well. The Hildegard Collective was a finalist in the 2022 OSV Innovation Challenge, which is a program designed to build up innovative projects and ministries for the church today. If you want to learn more about what we do, check out the show notes for our website, podcast, and social media links. If you're a Catholic musician, we invite you to come join us. And if you know a Catholic musician, we invite you to share our ministry with them. Thanks so much for listening, and God bless.
This podcast is part of the Spoke Street Network. For more great podcasts, visit spokestreet.com.